Okay, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Manage Radical Change. My name is Vonda Page, and I am your host. I am the Chief Empowerment Officer at Radical Change LLC. We are a nonprofit leadership education foundation who is focused on having accessible and affordable leadership training for anybody who wants it. And one of the things that I have been focusing my own training about is narcissism. And I've been studying narcissism for about a year and a half now. And what I want to dedicate this episode very specifically to is the hidden manipulation. The hidden manipulation. How narcissists, they know you without even realizing it. And so today, I had an aha moment, and I realized how I was manipulated by a narcissist into, how do I want to say it, into just enabling that behavior. And it wasn't until I had an incident where something was said that was so out of line and that really surprised me, but it didn't surprise me. But what even surprised me more so was my own reaction, because what I knew in that moment was that that person was a narcissist. So, are you stuck in a relationship where you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells? If so, you are not alone. I have been in relationships where you don't know how the person is going to take what you say, where you don't know what they're going to say, and that it doesn't matter like how good everything is going or how nice everything is. There's always some undercurrent of some nonsense and some bullshit. So for me, I had a situation several years back where one of my relatives just did something so out of pocket. And in the moment, I realized, oh, that person is fucked up. And there's nothing that could be said or done that's going to change their response or their reaction. Everybody in this room saw what I saw, but I'm the only one that's willing to call it out. I can't win against all these people. So I'm going to make my exit. And for me, that person was one of my aunts. My mom has 4 sisters. She's the second one. And when I look at all of my mom and her sisters, and I look at my grandparents on my mother's side, and I look at my grandfather's sister and my second and third cousins, and I look at everything in context, it all makes sense. Narcissism makes sense. The way people with toxic narcissism or with narcissistic personality disorder or with toxic traits or whatever you want to call it, the way that they get socialized and enabled makes you have to be the one that walks on eggshells if you're the one who is not willing to go along with it. And I can remember so many times my one aunt just like being just absolutely off the rails. Nobody saying nothing. And then when she leave the room, everybody talking about her. And I'm like, well, why don't y'all do something about it? Oh, well, you know she crazy. So you just going to call a person crazy, but never have any kind of conversation or do anything about anything, no matter how wrong they are. And I saw that happen over and over and over in my family. I saw, my mom did it. And my mom's 2 younger sisters that have kids, they did it. mistreat their children. And everybody watched and responded a little bit, but it's more like nobody ever really responded to the trauma. Not my trauma, not my cousin's trauma, and not whatever trauma caused my aunts to be so messed up. Now, the two of them, one of them I definitely know. Getting kicked out the house at 15 because you got pregnant, yeah, that's trauma. Your parents are throwing you away. That's abandonment. And all of my mom and her 4 sisters grew up in a house of functional alcoholics. My grandmother and my grandfather were functional alcoholics. My grandmother drank all day long. She started with gin and orange juice or gin and grapefruit juice. In the afternoon, she was drinking gin and tonic, and at night she was drinking something else. My grandfather drank bourbon or whiskey or scotch or whatever. He drank every day when he came home from work. Every day. And he drank on Saturdays and Sundays when he went to play golf. He drank on Wednesday nights when he went bowling. My grandmother drank on Tuesday nights when she went bowling. Christmas time, it was always Brandy Alexander's and whatever. But my grandparents, they didn't, around when we was kids, when I was growing up, they didn't act drunk. They just drank. But my aunts, they acted drunk. They would fight and do different stuff. And now looking back, thinking about them having different ones, my mom and, 1 or 2 or 3 of her sisters having different mental health challenges, drinking alcohol on top of all that. And then I remember one was taking all these different medicines and stuff, the impact of that, right? But nobody's saying anything. Everybody just acting like it's okay because they don't want to deal with the fallout, because people don't have enough self-esteem, enough self-concept to stick up for themselves. And that was not me. I always stuck up for myself. My mom was a narcissist, but I did not let her just say any old thing to me. I did not let my mom just beat on me without fighting her back, without running. Talk about fight or flight. That was me every day, fight or flight. The freeze only ever happened to me when it was a shock that I was being harmed by somebody. But that was only going to be for a second, because then I was going to run or I was going to fight. And I've always been that type of person that listened to my instincts. A lot of us don't do that and don't get the opportunity to do that because we grow up being controlled, whether it's through casual manipulation or whether it's through violence, right? Emotional violence, whether it's through neglect. Now, the thing that I've learned even more so about narcissism and how it works in alcoholic homes is that when you have a narcissist, so my grandfather definitely was the narcissist, and he and my grandmother were both alcoholics. My grandmother enabled my grandfather, and she enabled him because she drank too. So he couldn't call her a drunk, and she couldn't call him one because they was both drunks, right? They both smoked cigarettes. And my grandfather made enough money that my grandmother didn't have to work. And, my mom and her sisters had this great middle-class life that only white people really got to live, and only a few families ever got to live, right? And unfortunately, it just did not set them up for emotional maturity, for emotional regulation, and it didn't set them up for the type of human interaction and emotional regulation that makes for good relationships, and definitely that makes for good parents. So my upcoming book that's called The Healing Parent, I really dig into the importance of healing, as a parent. I really talk about my journey of healing, and I'm so glad that I started when I was a child. I'm so glad that I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself. That I was willing to, take a beating for my own authenticity. And, I guess that was from growing up around so many black women who survived so much horrible stuff. Can you imagine having to get married at 12 and having to have a baby at 13 by like a 40-year-old man? and then you live to tell about it, and then you married somebody else, and then you married somebody else, and you bought your own house and had your own so I think being around such strong, amazing Black women and learning so much from them gave me a lot of self assurance, and that I could take care of myself, because look, if they did it, I could do it, right? Not that I would want to, but I've taken care of myself, and I've taken care of my daughter, and I've coached and mentored and taught hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 30 years. And I'm going to continue to do so. And the way that one of the lenses that I use to do so is this lens of consistent learning. So when it comes to consistently learning about narcissism is when you're learning about yourself, right? So I know that so many people out here have toxic and narcissistic relationships in their life, especially if they're in a subordinate relationship, because narcissism in itself is based in power dynamics often, and that's what keeps people in the relationships. Whether the person has financial power over you, physical power over you, relational power over you. If they have something over you, it's much, much easier to succumb to this narcissistic abuse. And I know that a lot of people struggle with it, and I feel you. And the thing is, right, that once you recognize that you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you're recognizing these behaviors are toxic, these behaviors are harmful, then you have all kind of things that you can do for yourself. The first thing you could do is really start thinking about, how do I protect and persevere? Because protect and preserve, right? Because you can't change the narcissist. Confronting them isn't going to help. Gray rocking is very, very useful. Just kind of become boring and try to fade away as much as possible, but you can't change them. And if you call them out and say you are a narcissist, they're going to tell you are a narcissist. Then they're going to make you feel like you crazy. And then depending on how long you've been in a relationship, you're going to be like, oh, well, maybe it is me. And it could be a whole bunch of deeper psychological, complications that is really not necessary. So what I want to say, right, is that when you realize that narcissists are skilled at manipulation and snowing you with their everything, with the way they respond. Like my first husband, he had this way of, using his trauma in his life to treat me like shit. Well, my mom was fucked up. Huh? Bernice wasn't there. What? What does that have to do with you talking to me crazy? I didn't do nothing to you. Right? And just like using me into that narrative to be like, oh, well, this is why he's doing what he's doing. No. Not at all. Not at all. So, Dr. Ramani Durvasala is a really good, they consider her like the world expert on narcissism, and you should check her out. And one of the things she was talking about today, and it was an old episode when she was talking to Drew Pruitt, and she was talking about, how if people weren't in these relationships with narcissists, they wouldn't really need therapy. And she would be out of a job. And it made me think about, the importance of setting boundaries and how boundaries are for you. And once you set those boundaries for yourself, you will cut off toxic relationships. You will cut off toxic people. You'll cut off these narcissistic people sooner rather than later, because you'll realize that you don't want them in your life, because you don't want them taking off any more minutes off of your life, right? You don't want them harming you anymore. So it's like, I'm good, right? Like when I say, when I was a kid, we used to have great family gatherings for your birthday and Christmas, and every holiday it was like a family thing. And it was just the best. It was just really the best. And then my grandmother died in 1989, and that was literally the end of it. Like the family went downhill after that. Everybody's dysfunction came out even worse, which now looking back made me realize that my grandmother was the one holding in. She was the one. I was thinking about what Dr. Gabor Mate said about addiction and how women, die early because women take in everything. My grandmother was holding it all together, holding it together for my grandfather, holding it together for my mom and all her sisters, holding it together for her, friends, for her grandchildren. She was holding it all together and sacrificing her own health and died, super young from cirrhosis and hepatitis. And like she had like all of these just like really horrible diseases that was lifestyle based. It was just sad. It was sad. And after my grandmother died, like the family just deteriorated so rapidly. My grandfather got married right away, and he moved on. And it was I know all my aunts and my mom, they felt abandoned. They tried to act like they liked the lady or whatever, and her family basically took over. It was crazy. It was a lot. And there's been no healing, no nothing. I remember at one point I wrote a letter to Ayan Van Zant to see if we could be on her show. I ain't even get a response. I'm like, this would have been a good show. I really wanted to address, these patterns and this harm, but I couldn't do it alone. But what narcissists do is they manipulate to get the supply that they need, and they just get enough just to feed whatever they need. And that's why it doesn't do any good for you to confront them about anything, right? Because it's not going to matter. Are they getting the attention? Are they getting the whatever, whatever it is? It's all about what they need emotionally, because they need somebody else to fulfill them. They can't fulfill themselves. They can't fulfill themselves. One of my aunts was in a relationship with somebody who did something so disgusting. I couldn't believe that she stayed with him. I couldn't believe it. I was like, that is so nasty and foul. Like, but people, do what they do, right? But for whatever reason, like she wanted the money he was bringing in. I'm like, ain't no amount of money worth it. I don't give a shit. She wanted the money he was bringing in. She wanted something that everybody had all the time. The things she did to her own sisters, to her own daughters. Whew. I mean, it's been crazy. And, I want to just tell people that no matter what you've experienced at the hands of a narcissism, it wasn't your fault. You've been manipulated. Now, you can break free, but it's hard. I'm not going to say it's not. It's not. What you get to do is you get to learn about yourself. You get to learn about how every relationship you're in reflects who you are and where you are. It reflects your wounds and different points of trauma and maturity and emotional regulation. And I want to invite you to take an introspective look at yourself. I want to invite you to think deeply, right, about the person that you want to be. And think about the relationships that you have in your life. Do you have any unhealthy relationships with people, with substances, with behaviors, with attitudes, with mindsets? If so, you could potentially benefit from a coach. You could benefit from some group work. You could benefit from some journaling. You could benefit from some, different thought work, and maybe even some one-on-one coaching. I want to invite you to go to Radical Change Leadership in your app store, on Google Play or Apple, or from the web. And I want to invite you to connect with me, and let's talk about how you want to manage radical change in your life. Let's talk about your healing. Let's talk about your journey so that you can really focus on results and not resolutions. I just found out a couple of weeks ago that the second Friday in January is called Quitter's Day. because that's when people quit their New Year's resolutions. Well, I want to invite you to get results, not resolutions. Get results and set boundaries to protect yourself, so that you don't have to worry about being manipulated by narcissists or anybody else. I want to encourage you to do a little research. Check out Dr. Ramani Durvasala. Check out her work on narcissism and narcissistic abuse. And I want to invite you to check out some of my other videos where I really share my journey of narcissistic abuse and recovery. Not only have I been doing this ongoing study and actionable work for going on 2 years, but I'm taking that work a step further and sharing with you things that I've learned. So I hope that this was an enlightening conversation and helped you recognize some narcissistic behavior and help you think about the importance of protecting yourself from these toxic relationships. Thanks so much for hanging out, and I will see you the next time.